echoes from silent pines, and the door closed. The first night in Silent Pines taught Mara something about how quiet can pretend to be sleep. Boxes leaned like small cliffs in the living room. The heater clicked like an old throat, and then lapsed into absence. Outside, pines folded into a single dark wall. The house settled around her with the deliberate silence of a place that has been waiting. Even the ordinary noises, pipes, the refrigerator's sigh, felt shifted, as if someone had tuned them a little sharp, and then left the room. She found the attic door by accident, or perhaps it found her. It sat in a narrow upstairs corridor like a secret wound, unpainted, heavy, seam visible where no knob should be. When she ran a palm along the grain, it vibrated faintly, as if something small and patient were humming on the other side. There was no handle from the hallway. A tiny keyhole stared back, perfectly ordinary and wholly unreadable. The sound that rose from the wall made the hairs on her arm stand up. At night, the house found ways to suggest company. Wind chime tones, impossible for the windless hours, rang high and small from the porch eave. Steps that matched her size and pace fell out of sync and then lined up again. Echoes collected and returned snippets of her speech, delayed, like a radio station playing a fraction behind. When she called the name of the town aloud, it came back softer, as if from behind a curtain. Silent Pines, a place that rehearsed its own name. In a box labeled kitchen, she found the brass key. It lay on top of tissue paper, as if someone had placed it there at the last possible moment. Cold under her fingers, its teeth were worked with an odd, patient intricacy that suggested more marriages and doors than she could imagine. She had not packed it. The house seemed to approve her discovery in a mild way, like a neighbor approving of a borrowed tool returned to the wrong drawer. The Polaroid turned everything stranger. Tucked behind a strip of wallpaper that peeled like a flake of old paint, the instant photograph was half faded, colors bled into anonymous brown. It framed the attic door from the opposite angle, and in its grainy center was a shadowy figure in the doorway, posture arresting, shoulders familiar. For half a second, she thought it was a stranger. Then she realized with a chill that the silhouette matched her own shape at a glance. Her head tilt, the way she clutched her bag. Little alterations accrued like slow weather. Cups that had been on the left migrated to the right. A chair she had left turned toward the window at dawn. Dust arranged itself in footprints that were not hers, but followed the shape of a human stride. The house's calendar seemed to lose a day here and a day there. At breakfast, she would feel sure she remembered a conversation that pages of days insisted had never happened. Memory itself acquired a tremor around these rooms. Paranoia arrived with good manners. When she met the only neighbor at the market, he had eyes like a man who keeps too many small, numb things in his head. He said the house had a history of doors that remember, and offered nothing more than that, shaking a paper bag of apples as though it might clatter into clearer sentences. His warning was both precise and nonsense. "Keep it closed," he said, as if closure were a particular type of care, not just avoidance. She tried to leave once and found herself moving in a circle. The road sign that had been straightforward the day before bent its arrow as if to correct her. The route she remembered became a loop of trees, and the same farmhouse glimpsed twice. At dusk, the pines folded around the car and made the map a private jest. She turned the ignition on and off until the engine consulted its own patience. When she returned home, the porch light welcomed her with a familiarity that felt less hospitable than predestined. The summer night, she decided to open the attic was still in a way that made stillness loud. She put the brass key into the keyhole at midnight, breath fogging white in the muted kitchen light. The lock took a small amount of pressure and then gave with a sound like a throat clearing. When she pushed the door inward, it exhaled the house's collected memory, a whisper of past footsteps and the faint tint of perfume that belonged to no one she could name. Inside the attic, the air had the brittle clarity of old paper. There were relics arranged with almost ceremonial indifference. A solitary wind chime hung where a beam caught moonlight, a stack of Polaroids in a neat corner, each image different enough to argue with the last. At the center, a mirror leaned against the far wall, its glass sipping the room and returning it with a slight delay, like a translator too slow to be trusted. The mirror's reflection held the house, and the house held a door that was closed. The mirror did what the photograph had only teased. Her reflected self lifted a hand a half-beat after she did, and when the delay matched, she felt as if something else had learned her timing. From behind the mirror's glass, a voice, hers and not hers, asked softly, "Why did you leave it open?" The phrasing carried the weight of accusation and an intimacy that made the attic air too small. For a long breath, she could not tell which door the voice spoke of. She snapped the mirror's frame with a closing motion more violent than she intended, and the sound ricocheted down the house like a thrown pebble. The attic exhaled in soft sorrow. She backed toward the door, heart climbing into a voice she barely recognized, and shut it. The latch slid home with the stubborn, final click of a thing that doesn't want to be asked again. For a half-minute, the quiet that followed seemed full of patient, precise listening. Later, in the living room, the house resumed its polite domesticity, but the tone had shifted. Her phone displayed no missed calls. The kettle boiled with nothing unusual, and yet the wind chime's notes threaded through rooms like a reminder. She found, tucked into the satchel she had left by the door, a Polaroid she didn't remember taking. The house from the lane, angle 3/4 back, the attic window dark, and a small figure reflected in it. She studied the tiny silhouette and felt the question inside her fold tighter. She considered leaving in the morning, then the afternoon, then the kind of evening that pretends daylight for an hour longer. Each time she moved toward the car, something in the house rearranged an excuse. A memory misfiled, a scent that anchored her, a photograph that changed its focus by morning. In the end, she did not go. She sat on the porch and listened. The village was a quilt of distant lamps, and the road sign leaned in the same bent way, as if pointing not away, but back to the place that wanted to keep her.